Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte
They retweeted a misleadingly edited video of Nancy Pelosi, edited to highlight and exaggerate stuttering. Another fake video is also circulating online. It's been slowed down to make Pelosi appear incoherent, ill, perhaps drunk. The video is fake. It's manipulated. Numerous audio and video experts and fact-checking organizations have confirmed that. But that video in particular has been viewed by millions of people on Facebook. And in fact, it's still up on Facebook, even though Facebook knows it's fake. They've added comments from independent fact-checkers to inform people who watch it and have made it less prominent, but it is still up there. Now, YouTube took it down, but it's still up on Twitter. They're not even commenting about it. Facebook, however, was good enough to provide us with a spokesperson. She's Monica Bickert, the company's vice president for global policy management. I spoke to her just a short time ago. So, Monica, in the wake of the 2016 election, obviously Facebook has repeatedly told Congress, the American people, that you're serious about fighting disinformation and fake news. Yet this doctored video that I think your own fact checkers acknowledge is doctored of Speaker Pelosi remains on your platform. Why?
Well, first off, I think the suggestion there is that we haven't taken action, and that's not right. We have acted. Anybody who is seeing this video in newsfeed, anyone who is going to share it to somebody else, anybody who has shared it in the past, they are being alerted that this video is false. And this is part of the way that we deal with misinformation. We work with internationally certified fact-checking organizations that are independent from Facebook, and we think these are the right organizations to be making decisions about whether something is true or false. And as soon as we get, and we did in this case, as soon as we get a rating from them that content is false, then we dramatically reduce the distribution of that content, and we let people know that it's false so they can make an informed choice.
Why keep it up, then?
Yeah. We think it's important for people to make their own informed choice about what to believe. Our job is to make sure that we are getting them accurate information. And that's why we work with more than 50 fact-checking organizations around the world. If there were misinformation that was, let's say, tied to an ongoing riot or the threat of some physical violence somewhere in the world, we would work with safety organizations on the ground to confirm falsity and the link to violence, and then we actually would remove that misinformation.
So misinformation that doesn't promote violence, but misinformation that, portrays the third most powerful, politician in the country as a drunk or somehow impaired, that's fine.
No, what's important to us is making sure that people have the accurate information to make their own choice.
But it's not accurate
information. And I think if you look right now at we are telling people that this is false,
right,
and
but
we
you're
are
not
putting that information
but video
out there
is powerful
from our
than your
network.
Right, but the video is more powerful than whatever you're putting under the video.
Well, actually, what we're seeing is that the conversation on Facebook, on Twitter, offline as well, is about this video having been manipulated. I mean, as evidenced by, my appearance today, this is the conversation. The conversation is not about people believing this video. It's that they are discussing the fact that it was manipulated. And that's the conversation that people should be having.
You have no problem removing 3.39 billion fake Facebook accounts from October through March. So why is it okay for you to remove fake Facebook accounts but it's not okay to remove a clearly fake video?
Because we're focused, when we look at our community standards, those are about keeping the community safe.
How are fake
yes,
Facebook
fake accounts do
dangerous?
engage. Fake accounts, we do see that fake accounts engage in safety violations more than accounts that are real.
3.39 billion of them
fake
are
accounts,
promoting violence? I mean,
it's a fundamental... No, that's not what I said. It's a fundamental rule when you come to Facebook, you have to use your real identity. That's always been our rule. And we do see that accounts that are fake are engaged in safety violations more than authentic accounts.
Right.
And by the way, and this is probably not shocking, fake accounts are also more likely to distribute misinformation or fake news. And so part of our effort to combat misinformation, it's not just about working with third-party fact checkers. When we remove fake accounts, we are also reducing the chance that these accounts would be sharing misinformation. And I would point out that this is working.
If you have the scale, though, to be able to remove over the course of 6 months 3.39 billion fake accounts, and you have the scale to remove, I think you ID'd 80 in that 6-month period, 83% of accounts or comments that were selling drugs or doing something illegal or promoting something illegal. You certainly have the scale to decide something that you know is clearly fake. It's not even a question. I guess I still just don't logically understand. I understand it's a big business to get into of trying to figure out what's true or not, but you're making money by being in the news business. If you can't do it well, shouldn't you just get out of the news business?
Look, I reject the notion that we're not doing a lot to counter misinformation.
No, I didn't say you're not doing a lot.
So,
I'm just saying if you are in this particular case spreading and allowing the spread of a clearly false doctored video. Again, you're in the news business. There's a responsibility that comes with that, and this isn't even a question.
We aren't in the news business. We are in the social media business.
Well, you are in the news
business.
business.
Facebook to share.
The reason you're sharing news is because you make money from it. It keeps people watching you and more involved in your site, which I get, and that's fair. But if you're in the news business, which you are, you got to do it right. And this is false information you are spreading.
We have a site where people can come and share what they think, what's important to them, the news that they find relevant. And when they do that, we want to make sure that they have access to accurate information. If there is a threat of safety, if we're talking about terror propaganda, that's something where we can actually assess that on its face and say, yes, this is terror propaganda, and we can pull it down. When you're talking about political discourse, if it's misinformation that is related to safety,
Okay.
If it's misinformation that's related to safety, we can and we do remove it. And we work with safety groups to do that. But when we're talking about political discourse and misinformation around that, we think the right approach is to let people make an informed choice.
So if somebody makes a video of President Trump and slows it down and makes it seem like he's drunk, which he's never had a drink in his life, that's okay with you? If that video is on and it makes people believe that the commander-in-chief is impaired with alcohol, that's okay on Facebook?
No, again, I want to be really clear here, because the suggestion here is that we're not acting.
No, would you take that down? Would you take down that video of the President of the United States that's been slowed down and manipulated by Russia, say, to make it look like he's drunk and impaired?
We would remove content that's created by fake accounts. We would remove misinformation that's created by fake accounts. We would also remove misinformation if it is related to a threat of safety on the grounds. When it comes to
so if a Russian
other types
individual...
of misinformation, we work with the fact-checking networks,
right,
and then we put that information proactively in front of people so they can make their own decisions.
So if it's a real person, not a fake account, which I know you're concerned about fake accounts because that gets the legitimacy of Facebook, but if it's actually just a real account, but it's somebody just doing that, they're not doing even to make money, they're just putting it out there, that video would stay up on Facebook.
Look, we have rolled out over the past few years all sorts of products and tools to allow people to have more transparency into the information they're seeing.
You can't say yes or no.
And that, well, because it really, the answer is, if there is something that is being shared by somebody who is an inauthentic actor, we would remove it. If it is tied to violence on the ground, we would remove it. And there's a whole lot of other things that, there's a whole lot of other things that we're doing to make sure that we are not remotely in the same place where we were in 2016.
I appreciate you being on.
No, we care a lot about getting this right, and we're happy to share what we're doing.
It is Monday, the 27th of May of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays, and a special River City Hash Mondays because it is Memorial Day. A bittersweet holiday, one that I always found difficult to combine the solemnity of it, is that a word? And the raucous, jovial aspect that people seem to enjoy on a weekend, especially an extended weekend. People who want to laugh and guffaw and watch moonshiners drive around in circles for hours and hours and hours. Oh, wow. Oh, did you hear? Yeah, they stopped the Indy 500 to give a salute to the troops. And a lot of people were upset. They thought that was pretty un-American to stop the Indy 500. Or whatever it was that they were racing. I think they were doing the Indy 500. But, yeah, there were a lot of people that were upset about that. And I'm thinking, well, if the height of your civic involvement is watching moonshiners drive around in circles for hours and hours, jeez, then I guess it would be un-American to stop the race to salute the troops, especially the ones who have fallen. Yep, well, I have mentioned that you never find these debates happening in Formula One. Usually you don't, I don't know, combine jingoistic nationalism. Some do, but not usually in Formula One. When you're driving around in circles without any curves, dips, and valleys, and little hills and switchbacks, you're going to get, I don't know, poorly educated. I think for every turn that you experience, every turn of a lap, every lap that you experience as a spectator kills more brain cells. I think that they should do a scientific study, and I'm pretty damn sure they'd find me correct. I mean, look at the results. It's like you can't really see or hold the wind, but you can feel its effects. You can see the effects of the wind, and you can see the effects of all those mindless viewings of moonshiners driving around in circles for hours and hours and hours. Oh, God, please put a turn in there somewhere. Put a right turn in somewhere, please. Well, enough of that. It was another one of those weekends, you know. I don't know why Trump felt it was necessary to go to Japan on Memorial Day to thank them for attacking Pearl Harbor and making America what it is today. And he created, oh, God, the height of ego of this fellow. He created a trophy called the President's Cup and presented it to the top sumo wrestler who I think is retiring or has retired. Regardless, a never-before trophy. It's almost like the picture of him on Time magazine that he has up on all of his in all of his resorts. That he never had his picture on Time, but he paid for one of those Time magazines. You know, the kind where you can get a Time magazine cover with nothing in the middle, and it's a mirror, and you can stand in front of it, and there you are. You're Man of the Year. That's right, and there's always Man of the Year. So Trump had one of those made up and plastered it all over his resorts. And he did actually give some autographed copies of his portrait to Shinzo Abe. To be fair, you know, Melania did give an autographed copy of her to Mrs. Abe. So, you know, equal is equal, right? Ego is ego. Wow. And, yeah, Japan right now is a titter. Not because of this weird president's trophy that he presented at a sumo wrestling event match, but that he broke, 1,000 years of tradition? I don't think the sumo has been around that long. I think it's more like around 700 years for the sumo. I may be mistaken, but regardless, I know a little bit about the sumo code. But when viewing a sumo event, traditionally, you sit cross-legged on a cushion. Well, can you imagine Trump being able to get to the floor, let alone getting back up? And if somebody helped him, he'd need 3 or 4 people helping him. Not that that's, bad because of his girth, but I don't think he has the legs for it. I don't think he can get up without putting his butt up first and inching up like an inchworm and then standing. And he'll need help doing that to straighten up. So you can't have the President of the United States doing that, especially one as virile as he is. Jeez. So that has sent Japan a Twitter because it is an affront. It is an insult. I mean, normally when presidents go to Japan, the way they insult the leaders of Japan and the country itself is throwing up on their leader. Jeez. This guy just breaks tradition right and left. I mean, come on. Well, not being able to sit on a mat cross-legged at a sumo event. So then Japan had to rush to get a proper chair for him to sit in. They don't really have them in the auditorium. They have cushions. So he's got essentially a ringside seat, and he's the only one on a chair. Wow. When in Rome. Well, that's what I call the ugly American, where you take everything that you have, all your entitlement, and you impose it on somebody in their country. And then whine if you're not treated properly. They didn't know English. Yikes. Well, not only is Japan a titter over this and basically calling him a gaijin, which is a derogatory term for, foreigners and particularly white people. Just saying. So he's pretty much made clear that to the Japanese population that all their prejudices, biases, and fears about us, well, it's pretty much true. Crass, brash, loud, impolite, pushy. Yeah, that's us, folks. That's us. And we have the leader of the free world making an example for the rest of us. We are him, and he is us. What's on the rest of the menu? We had a bit of a longer lead-in because that was Facebook pretty much not being able to give a straight answer on why they still have the Pelosi vids going. They're able to take down artists' depictions of a MAGA hat that's been turned into, for instance, a KKK hood. That got that artist banned for life. And also MAGA hat in the form of a swastika. That was too much for Facebook's terms of service. That person was banned too. An artist banned for life for promoting hate. But when it comes to right-wingers putting things up, Facebook, well, as the spokeslady said, we like the people out there to make an informed decision. With the information that we give them, which is very little, yeah, you can now go and try to see the Pelosi vid on Facebook, and it will say, did you know that some other people have done some reporting on this? They don't say it's fake. You have to go to these other reports to find out it's fake. And I love the fact checkers they have on board, too. They used to have the people from the Weekly Standard, but the Weekly Standard went out of business. And they thought, well, I don't know, maybe we need to have somebody who's actually in business be our fact checkers. The Weekly Standard. That's why right-wing hit jobs are able to continue on Facebook. Jack on Twitter hasn't said diddly. Does he ever? Well, on the rest of the menu in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, the beer industry lost over 40,000 jobs thanks to Trump's trade war. On the, it's because of aluminum manufacturing, beer in cans, used bottles. We can make glass here. Texas Republicans doubled down on another voter suppression push as their legislative session ends. If you can't win, keep people from playing. And with the far right responsible for a sharp increase in crime, Jews in Germany are advised not to wear kippahs everywhere in public. In fact, they're being advised to rarely wear them anywhere. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where Hong Kong protesters demanded China be held to account for the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. The Chinese don't call it a massacre. The rest of the world does. And the liberal pro-European coalition, Progressive Slovakia Together, won the EU election in Slovakia. Some mixed news there. The more liberal coalitions and climate change not advocates for climate change, but the ones who want to do something about climate change, saw big-time gains and held the right wing at bay, though the right wing, when I say right wing, I'm talking about Nazi fascists. Though they didn't have any gains, they didn't lose anything either. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Time's just a-flying here on Memorial Day. Oh, at least it's a holiday. Well, I guess we can take it easy. Well, if you would go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is the chat room link, a pretty darn good way to engage with us, and Kelly Lincoln is there monitoring it for your chat room enjoyment and engagement. If you would, and thank you, Kelly. If you would look to the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice the link to become a recurring Patreon to Netroots Radio. If you've listened to the broadcast and the podcast before, this seems like a daily litany of requesting monies, and it is, because we don't get any big grants from anybody. It'd be nice. And we do have some very generous Patreons, and thank you so much for that. We are in the midst of, putting funds together to purchase newish machinery to replace the ones that have been workhorsing to exhaustion. And they've been doing stellar work and took over from the previous machines that were workhorses in their own right as well. But machinery now is made, it's planned obsolescence, but on a more technological fashion and a lot more expensive too. So thank you for your generosity. We could use more of you, and that would precipitate getting the monies and paying our bills at the same time, because you not only have to save money for the machines, you have to pay the bills also. That's weird. It's an existential question on whether to pay the bills or not to pay the bills. Except, you know what the answer is going to be if you don't pay the bills. Okay? At least on our level. I haven't figured out how to do the hate marketing to make the really big bucks. Can't figure that one out. So in lieu of that, we're just going to have to do the good work, find more and better Democrats to elect to office, and your help in keeping Resistance Radio resisting, as the founders originally intended, by the way, goes a long way to making sure that democracy prevails in these perilous times. indeed. So thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we are forever grateful that he does. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get the links out on social media. And you can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And now the podcast, yes, I'm at the podcast part now, can be found by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, and wherever podcasts can be found. All right. Well, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. River City Hash Monday's Memorial Day Special. And it's by Dan de Saint Martin out of Share Blue Media. The beer industry is blaming Trump's disastrous trade war for the loss of 40,000 jobs between 2016 and 2018. Two beer industry groups said the increased cost of aluminum, thanks to Trump's tariffs, have caused brewers large and small to cut back their investment, resulting in the massive job loss. Aluminum tariffs, or as the Brits like to say, aluminium, are increasing brewers' costs and are an anchor on a vibrant industry. And that was by Jim McGreevy, Chief Executive Officer of the Beer Institute. Each brewer is deciding for themselves how to absorb that expense, whether it's raising prices, laying off workers, or delaying innovation and expansion. I wonder, are aluminum cans? I guess they are. We didn't really do cans when I was at the Bison Brewing Company in Berkeley. We had our own bottles. We didn't blow the glass, but I have to look into this because I prefer my beer out of a glass bottle rather than a can, and always have. But I guess I'm one of those elitists. Coastal, too. During the 2 years before Trump took over, jobs in the beer industry grew by 27%. Then, Trump slapped a 10% tariff on aluminum, and the number of beer-related jobs dropped from 2.23 million in 2016, and then by 2018 it was down to 2.19 million jobs. Aluminum makes up more than 11% of the cost of manufacturing beer. I got to find out what glass costs. To make up for the higher costs they must pay, the industry called Trump's tariff a tax on beer, noting that consumers who choose to drink beer will be people who ultimately bear the cost of this tax, because that's how business works. Now, in February, former Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen said she does not believe Trump understands the economics of international trade. It looks like the loss of another 40,000 jobs for Americans seems to prove her right. Igor Darish of Salon brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Texas Republicans are pushing two new bills that critics say are aimed at suppressing voter turnout after a similar bill died days before the end of their legislative session. Yesterday, Sunday, a state Senate bill that was passed with only Republican support, which would have increased criminal penalties for voter registration-related crimes, like registering people to vote, and particularly if they're black and really brown. No more acorns for you. And made it harder for volunteers to help elderly and disabled voters get to the polls, effectively died after it missed a legislative deadline in the House. With the legislative session drawing to an end, Republican lawmakers then passed two more bills that critics say are intended to reduce voter turnout. I can speak. House Bill 1888 would ban mobile polling stations, which help college students, the elderly, and low-income residents cast ballots from being mobile. The bill would require these temporary branch polling places to remain in just one location for the duration of the early voting period. Mobile polling stations are currently used as a way to address demand and wait times for groups that may have difficulty getting to a polling location, like rural voters, college students, and residents at long-term care facilities. You know how big Texas is? Yeah, so if you can't get to the voting polls, we'll bring the voting polls to you. No more of that, according to this bill. State Senator Joan Huffman, a Houston repug, I'm sorry, the denouement is in this reporter's opinion, of course, who sponsored the bill, said that the mobile polling places were being abused by targeting desirable voting populations at the exclusion of others. See, in Texas, the only people that can exclude are the repugs through gerrymandering. And if you try to get around their ability to suppress your vote, you are a criminal. She rejected concerns from Democrats about disadvantaged groups being hurt by the move, saying that those who need to make arrangements to vote have time to do that. But Charles Mario Henry, a San Antonio U.S. Army veteran with impaired mobility, said the move would also hurt vets. This is going to take away their ability to access these polls. We don't need to have voter suppression laws, especially after serving the country honorably. Oh, I'm sorry. Apparently, this veteran doesn't know the long history of America. It's how we treat the veterans. Happy Memorial Day. Of Think Progress brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. And a very special Memorial Day special it is, too. Felix Klein, Germany's commissioner on anti-Semitism, said, "I cannot advise Jews to wear the kippah everywhere all the time in Germany." He blamed the lifting of inhibitions and uncouthness, which is on the rise in society, for the rise in anti-Semitism. Klein's comments were made in response to new crime data that showed continued growth in anti-Semitic criminal acts, with the vast majority of perpetrators being members of the German far right and not new immigrants from predominantly Muslim countries who are the common scapegoat. And we're looking at you, Donnie Two Scoops. We're looking at you. Germany's national crime rate has actually fallen, dropping last year to the lowest level since 1992. The number of crimes committed by non-German individuals fell 23%. And the one area of crime that saw a 2.5% increase was anti-Semitic attacks, with 94% of them committed by far-right nationals in Germany since 2017. And those are far-right German nationals, by the way. According to figures for 2018 released last week, far-right individuals committed a similar percentage of anti-Semitic crimes. Now, Donald Trump argued on Twitter last year that Germany's crime rate was way up and blamed the immigration stance adopted by the Germans and other European countries that he viewed as too welcoming to refugees from North Africa and the Middle East. Well, his criticism was wrong. The broader crime rate was lower than it had been in the past, and the share of crimes perpetrated by non-Germans actually fell. And that especially held true for people committing anti-Semitic crime. Claudia Vignoni, a German legal expert on anti-Semitism, said, "Anti-Semitism has always been here, but I think that recently it has again become louder, more aggressive, and flagrant. And it's the far-right German nationals who are doing it." Final results of the recent EU Parliament election began to come in last night, Sunday, with pro-EU blocs vying with anti-EU nativist blocs in Germany. The early returns appeared to show a strong showing for the pro-immigration Greens and losses for the traditionally successful centrist bloc. The populist Eurosceptic AfD party did not perform as well as it did in previous elections. AfD's reputation has been marred by accusations of anti-Semitism after members made anti-Semitic comments and trivialized the Holocaust. Okay, let's go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we're going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, Middle-earth, or at least Middle Ground. Released most likely coincidentally with the culmination of the Game of Thrones phenomenon, the movie Tolkien takes us back to where it all started, as it's a fair conjecture that without his Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, interest in fantasy at the level we've seen may not have ever happened. Tolkien is a biopic, a necessarily fraught formula. This one picks up with the action in the bloody trenches of World War I, a known influence on the author, and returns there frequently as we are familiarized with his early life, which includes being orphaned at an early age with a brother who somehow disappears from the narrative here. We see him form a circle of friends at school, meet his love interest, and witness his budding affinity for language. Into all this, director Dom Karokowski, a major Tolkien fan himself, carefully weaves in subtle and not-so-subtle references from the literary works, which were met with satisfied-sounding sighs, at least from the audience I was with. How this really helps the movie, though, is another question. Tolkien's friends may have been a fellowship. Edith, his love interest, probably was enamored of Wagner's Ring cycle, and those scenes are among the movie's best for different reasons, and maybe the trenches did inspire Mordor, but after the third or fourth apparition in Battlefield Smoke, we have the idea. Though the acting from Nicholas Hoult as the lead and Lily Collins as Edith is first class, the period composition exquisite, and the direction impeccable, the characters feel truncated and developed only as far as necessary to keep the stream of life-to-works parallels going. Ultimately, Tolkien is a movie for fans, and if you are one, it will add to your knowledge of this beloved figure, and all without you having to worry if it'll win any awards. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at Take2MovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. A few years ago, scientists determined that our thermostats are sexist. Namely, that office climates had been optimized for a hypothetical room full of 40-year-old, 150-pound men, using standards developed more than 50 years ago. And that ends up leaving a lot of women in the cold.
It's called the battle of the thermostat, right?
Tom Chang, a behavioral economist at the USC Marshall School of Business. He says it goes beyond comfort for women.
It seems that it's not just a matter of comfort, but it also affects their productivity.
Chang and his colleague tested that link between temperature and performance by quizzing 543 German students on basic addition skills and word scrambles in rooms that varied from 60 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit.
And if you went from, let's say, the low 60s to the mid 70s, you saw an increase in female performance of almost 15%, 1-5, not 5-0, which I found remarkably large, as much larger than I had expected.
The effects tapered off after the mid 70s. But men, on the other hand, had a small decrease in performance, about 3%, as temperatures rose to the mid 70s. The results are in the journal PLOS ONE. And there's a chance these findings might explain things like disparities in test scores on the SAT.
The long-standing gap in performance between high school boys and high school girls on the math portion of the SAT is approximately 4%. So given the effect size we're finding, that's 3 degrees difference in indoor temperature.
Still, he says,
I wouldn't go running off writing policy off of one study.
But it seems Cynthia Nixon had the thermostat dialed in just right last year. The actor turned politician was preparing to debate Andrew Cuomo as they vied for the Democratic nomination for New York State governor. Debate venues are usually kept pretty chilly, but she requested a more balmy and perhaps cognitively friendly 76 degrees. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser, filling in for your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. As the U.S. population ages, more people are at risk for injuries. The largest percentage of injury-related deaths among this group are caused by falls. Elizabeth Burns is with CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control. She's joining us today to discuss ways to prevent injuries and deaths from falls among senior adults. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me.
Elizabeth, what are some of the more common consequences when a senior adult falls?
Well, first, it's important to note that falls are incredibly common. More than 1 in 4 older adults will fall in a given year. Common consequences include loss of independence and an increased fear of falling, as older adults are afraid to do the same kinds of activities they were doing before. And this can actually lead to more falls, as older adults have less strength in their lower body. Common consequences include hip fracture and traumatic brain injury. And ultimately, in 2016, almost 30,000 older adults died because of a fall.
So are falls more common in men or in women?
Falls are more common in women, and more women go to the emergency department because of a fall, and more women die because of a fall. However, the rate of fall deaths are more common in men than women. What this means is that out of 100,000 men, more will die from a fall than out of 100,000 women.
What are common causes of falls among older people?
Getting on and off the toilet and getting in and out of bed are common causes of falls. Walking around the hallways at night when the lights are off is a common way people fall. There's also an increased amount of medications used in seniors, which have side effects like making them lightheaded, and that increases the risk of falls and is a common cause.
With all of those factors, what are some ways our listeners can decrease their chances of falling?
Older adults should talk to their healthcare provider or doctor about how they can decrease their chances of falling. This can be done during the annual wellness visit or during annual physicals. The doctor will recommend an exercise program that should increase strength and balance, or maybe refer you to a physical therapist. Additionally, they can look through your medications and perhaps reduce your doses or suggest medications that decrease your chances of falls.
Are there things we can do to modify our homes to prevent falling?
Oh, absolutely. Installing grab bars on the side of the toilet, making sure that rugs are taped down or removed, making sure that there's lighting in the hallways are all really simple ways that an older adult can modify their home to prevent falls.
Where can listeners go to get more information about preventing falls?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/study, and that's spelled STEADI.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I've been talking today with Elizabeth Burns about ways to prevent fall-related injuries and deaths among senior adults. Improving strength and agility through regular exercise and removing potential obstacles in the home can help decrease the risk for falls. If you or a loved one is older and struggle with mobility, talk with a healthcare provider about ways to decrease the risks for fall-related injuries and death. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
What is the future of Roe versus Wade?
I'm Frances Crowe, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with my good friend, attorney Bill Newman.
In 1973, in Roe versus Wade, the United States Supreme Court recognized reproductive choice as a woman's fundamental constitutional right. But in 2019, that right to reproductive freedom, the right to an abortion, is under unprecedented and ferocious attack. Donald Trump has emboldened anti-choice forces with his appointment of 2 Supreme Court justices, with the context being the president's explicit promise or threat of overturning Roe versus Wade. Alabama has seized this time to pass a law that prohibits virtually all abortions, and Missouri, Georgia, Ohio, and Kentucky are close behind. If the Supreme Court were to uphold Alabama's law, it would destroy Roe. But the court could also destroy Roe as a practical matter by giving lip service to Roe in a future decision, but then permitting onerous restrictions and obstacles to access. We make no predictions, except one, and that is that there will be strenuous opposition to undermining the right to choice in the courts, in the Congress, in the state legislatures, and on the streets.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom cannot defend itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1935. That was the day the United States Supreme Court unanimously declared the National Industrial Relations Act unconstitutional. The act had been passed just 2 years before as the centerpiece of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's plan to combat the Great Depression. By the time Roosevelt took office, nearly a quarter of the nation's workforce was unemployed. To combat this staggering unemployment, the act called for $3.3 billion to be spent on public works projects. It also sought to regulate industry to better promote fair competition. Businesses that adopted the act's codes could display a poster emblazoned with a blue eagle. Each poster declared, "We do our part." At first, there was positive public feedback for the plan. Hugh S. Johnson, one of the primary authors of the act, was even named Time magazine's Man of the Year for 1933. But soon, businesses began to complain about the many regulatory codes associated with the act. The act was intended as an emergency plan and was set to expire after 2 years, but it did not make it that far. The Schechter Poultry Corporation was found to be in violation of several codes. They claimed the codes were unconstitutional, and the company fought the violations all the way to the United States Supreme Court and won a unanimous decision. But for those in the labor movement, the most important part of the act was Title I, Section 7, Part A. And although the designation might sound boring, its message was powerful. It read in part that employees shall have the right to organize and bargain collectively through representatives of their own choosing. With the act's passage, union membership grew. For example, the Amalgamated Clothing Workers Union doubled in size from 60,000 to 120,000 members.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. River City Hash Mondays and a very special Memorial Day special River City Hash Mondays it is. So, we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 58 degrees Fahrenheit, slated for a high of around 75. Right now we are under cloudy conditions. We are forecast to have thunderstorms imminent, bringing with it some rain. That should start around 2 p.m. local time and go on for a bit. Winds are currently out of the west-northwest at about... they're currently out of the west-southwest at about 1 to 2 miles per hour. In another couple of hours, though, they will then shift out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, mixing cold and warm air, making thunderstorms with some rain. Looks like we might have, about a tenth to a quarter. That's quite a range, but it is depending upon where you are here in this neck of the woods, and we have a lot of them. Conifers, by the way. Let's see, isolated thunderstorms overnight, when it will then become mostly clear late. Winds will be at light and variable with a low near 56 to 57 degrees. And then tomorrow, looks like we're going to have a high of about 80. And winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, with a lot of sun and a few passing clouds. Grass pollen remains very high. The air quality index is in the good range at 18 parts per million, and that UV index has now gone very high at 9. And I haven't seen 9, for quite a while. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.79 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and that relative humidity is 93%. So who knows? Maybe we will be getting some rain. We will be getting thunderstorms because of the confluence of hot and cold. I can see weather cells in the mountains right now east of us. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 68 and partly cloudy. Paris is 73 and partly cloudy. Rome is 65 and mostly cloudy, with its own advisory for thunderstorm activity that could knock out its electrical grid. And I should mention, I do live in an area where thunderstorm activity could knock out our electrical grid too. So if Netroots Radio happens to be knocked off the air, keep refreshing. Hopefully we'll be back on real quick if that were to happen. Kiev is 79 and fair. Kabul is 74 and fair. Hong Kong is 78 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 78 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 50 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 51 and mostly cloudy with a small craft advisory. On the bay and offshore, let's see what their gusts are going to be at. 15 to 25 miles per hour with, that's sustained winds with gusts, yes, in the gale range, over 50 miles per hour. So take care if you happen to be on the bay and especially offshore. And New York is 75 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. The Big Apple shines. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. James Pomfret of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Thousands of protesters marched through central Hong Kong yesterday, Sunday, as part of an annual demonstration demanding that China be held accountable for its democracy crackdown at Tiananmen Square 3 decades ago. 3 decades. Jeez. Human rights groups and witnesses say that hundreds, perhaps thousands, died in the bloodshed as Chinese tanks rolled into Tiananmen Square and soldiers fired on student-led democracy protesters beginning on the night of June 3rd, 1989. The Tiananmen crackdown is a taboo subject in China, and authorities have refused to accept full accountability or release the death toll. Being a observer of these events when they were happening, I have to say that before the Chinese were able to crack down on news reports and news feeds coming out of Tiananmen Square, I have to say there was a massacre going on. Hong Kong and Macau are the only places on Chinese soil where the event is commemorated each year, while the democratic island of Taiwan also holds public gatherings for the victims, but that's not really China. The Hong Kong demonstrators marched to China's main representative liaison office in the city, where some held up banners while chanting slogans including, "The people will not forget." Some in the crowds were also from mainland China. Among them was Chen Shen, who said he had watched a documentary on the crackdown and later shared it widely with friends using a virtual private network to circumvent Chinese censors. "I felt angry and sad," he said during the march. "I think Chinese people have the right to know the truth." Police estimated that 2,100 people took part in Sunday's march. An annual candlelight vigil in Victoria Park on June 4th is expected to draw tens of thousands of people.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Liberal, pro-European coalition Progressive Slovakia together won the EU election in Slovakia with over 22% of the vote, followed by the ruling leftist Smear party at over 16%. And those are official results. The non-parliamentary coalition was set up 2 years ago and had already beaten Smear in presidential elections in March this year when its candidate, lawyer Zuzana Kapotova, defeated EU Commissioner Marko Sefcovic. The far-right People's Party, Our Slovakia, was third in the EU vote with 12.3%, according to complete results released by the Statistics Office. Well, some good word coming out of the EU. That brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but we're going to meet up tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesday, so stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver.